great creative person is a sponge. They're taking stuff in all the time, taking in, observing, watching, looking. A creative person has to be an optimist because you believe you can change the world. We're all creative. We're all creative. So this idea that you're creative and therefore is a nonsense. We're all creative. So therefore, I define creativity as an expression of self, of you, of what you are. And that has guided me through everything I've done. It's an expression of you, which then goes to, if you have a philosophy, it's what do you believe in? What are you trying to say? You've got to surround yourself with other great creative people because they will push you. Not difficult. You've got to be constantly inspired. If you read shit, you'll think shit, you'll create shit. It's very simple. Great creative people are outsiders. They live on the outside looking in. And I have great observers, and they're observing all kinds of things. And I had that kind of lucky life. My father was Irish. I born in London, brought up in London. So I kind of had these two worlds that I would dip in and out of. I was constantly observing, we're going from one world to the other world. And it was wonderful. It was a great experience in how to observe, how to create, how to use bits of culture and turn it into something else. Well, my mum was the most wonderful. I think actually in a way, I probably got my creativity off her. She loved art. She loved the whole creative process and music. But she was that, like so many women, I think, with a driving force in the family who kind of really made it happen. She was the one who would push you to go and do what you want to do, but just make it great. So she was the most wonderful. I'm very lucky like that. Very lucky to have parents who believed that education was the sort of key to freedom, key to a wonderful life. So we were lucky because, yes, 1944, bombs were dropping. I think like London was big. But, post-war, there was a complete change, a phenomenal change. And in a way, we were the first generation who didn't want to be like our parents. Along came Marlon Brando. He was very different. And music, very different. And so we were kind of driving the agenda. And to have been young back then and to have been part of that was phenomenal. Well, it's interesting, when people say to you, who or what inspired you to get into what you're doing? For me, it was a kind of series of accidents, really. I couldn't do maths, basically. So I thought, can't do maths. Well, I know, I'll do art instead. But I loved it. I loved drawing. I loved everything around it. I loved the sort of smell of it, the feel of it, for me, it was like going to a museum or a gallery. It was like going to church. And so I went to art school. To this day, I can still smell oil paint, and it takes me back to that moment I walked in to an art school called Hornsey Art School in North London. It just, to me, felt like the most liberating environment I could be in. And it was whilst I was at art school then later on that a great teacher, Peter Green, and Peter said to me, John, I don't think you're going to be a great painter, but you keep having ideas and talking about ideas and things like that. So I think what you should do is go to design school. You should be a designer, graphic designer. So because I valued his judgment incredibly, I then went to the London College of Printing. It's now called the London College of Communications. And it was whilst I was there, I then met this other wonderful legendary teacher, a man called John Gillard. And John showed me the work of DDB, and it was like a light switch being turned on in a darkened room. I just looked at it and thought, this is what I'm going to do. And it really was the light bulb moment. And it, bang, it went on, and that's it. So I then created an advertising portfolio. It was a fabulous American agency that opened in London called Pavitt Koenig & Lois, PKL. They were like the sort of a really hardcore Dahl Dane Burbank. They were even more creative and mad and rebellious and everything like that. That opened in London, had this wonderful art director who'd gone to open it called Tony Palladino. And I heard about this, and so I thought, oh God, I must go and show him my portfolio. This is fantastic. So I call him up and I get an appointment to go and see him. And he sort of goes through my portfolio, and he literally starts taking stuff out, screwing it up and throwing it away. And I'm going, what are you doing? This is my portfolio. How can you do that? This is rubbish, he said. You know, this is rubbish. You don't want that. This is rubbish. And he took one piece of work I'd done. And he said, this is really good. And he said, now go away and do another 20 like that. And I thought, Jesus, that again, another brilliant piece of teaching. I'll go and do that. And so then went away and created a portfolio that really, really, I think, had the power and creativity within it to get myself 2 jobs. But it was a great encounter. That's how I really got into it. The first job I had was a big American agency called Benson & Bowles. They don't exist anymore. They became part of DMB&B. Now here's something I want to say to everybody. I left college at that time and I had 2 offers of 2 jobs. And one was to go to Y&R and the other was to go to Benson & Bowles. Y&R were basically going to pay me twice what Benson & Bowles were going to pay me. And you think, well, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? And I said to a friend of mine who was then in the business, look, I've 2 job offers. Shall I go to Benson & Bowles? Shall I go to Y&R? And he said, well, the only thing I would say is they've got this brilliant art director who's come over from New York to go to Benson & Bowles. And I would chase the opportunity, not the money. And I listened to what he said. I went to Benson & Bowles. It was actually a terrible agency. But within 2 weeks of being there, the then creative director walked in and he said to me, I've found a writer for you to work with. And I went, oh, brilliant, because I'm an art director. And he said, his name's Charles Saatchi. Now, if I'd gone to Y&R, that connection would never have happened. So the first thing, I would say to all of the creative people is whatever you do, don't chase the money, chase the opportunity. It's a great time to be in the business. And of course, everybody says, do you watch Mad Men? Of course you watch Mad Men, but if you think a Mad Men's like advertising, it's a bit like saying, is ER like working in a hospital? No, don't be so stupid, I always say that Birnbach invented modern advertising. The idea that, it should be entertaining, engaging, it should actually, believe it or not, tell the truth. And he proved it could work. It was a brilliant time to be there. And I think being an outsider, was really, really helpful. And of course, the other thing too, is that I came from a very working class family. Advertising had been predominantly middle and upper middle class. And we were the first generation of kind of working class kids who benefited from post-war education. And, were coming in with different points of view. We had photographers like David Bailey, who was an East End boy, became famous. And, it was a whole generation of people. Rock and roll was by kids who'd come from poor backgrounds. The Rolling Stones or Beatles or whatever it might be, working class boys were making a huge change. So there was enormous social structural change going on, which we rode and which was brilliant. Charlie and I worked together in the early, in the sort of mid-60s, mid to sort of 66, 67. Then Charlie decided that he wanted to set an advertising agency up. And he asked me, would I go and join him? So I became a partner in the start of Saatchi & Saatchi in 1970. And I stayed for another 3 years. And I realized, it was a very exciting environment, but I realized that this was always going to be Charlie's gig, and I had a point of view and I wanted to express it myself. And I was approached in 73 to help set up the London office of TBWA. And I thought, well, why not? Let's go for it. Let's see if we can make something of it. And that's where I met John Bartle and Nigel Bogle, and we became the sort of triumvirate that ran the agency. We were, doing great work, and we were winning Grand Prix at Cannes. And after 8.5 years of running that, we set up BBH in 1982. I thought, oh, God almighty, this is the 3rd advertising agency I've started. But it was great fun, and that's how we got together. And the thing is that the 3 of us had worked together for about 8.5 years. So we kind of felt that BBH had been in test market for 8.5 years. John Bartle was a brilliant planner. Nigel was a fabulous account man, and obviously I was the creative guy. And there was something about 3, I've always believed that. I've always believed in the Holy Trinity, good enough for God, probably good enough for an advertising agency, why not, like I always think like a good band. You know, there's the lead singer, there's the bass guitarist, there's the drummer, there's that. They all, if they're great, they all know what they do and they do it. They don't try and do somebody else's job. I think we had that experience that said, respect each other. And respect is fundamentally important. Without that, you can't build a great company. We got it up and running, and we were very lucky. We got Audi as our first client, so it was a dream start, really.
Forsprung durch Technik, as we now observe people are saying.
Within sort of 6 months of opening, we were asked to pitch for Levi's, and we won the business. And then what we said to them was, go back to your roots, go back to toughness. You go back to the heart of it. Why was it? What made it successful? And then find a way of expressing that captures people's imagination. It transformed their business. And I always say, actually, BBH, all we do is product demonstrations. All the great work we do is just a product demonstration. Just find a brilliant way of putting it across. You know, people often say to me, how do you sell great work? And, you know, what's the trick? You know, obviously there's a trick. There isn't a trick. It's what you've got to do is convince the person that you're selling the work to that you're solving their problem, not your problem. And the way you do that is by knowing their business, understanding their business, and actually using words and terminology that relate to them, not to you. And in that way, they think, wow, this person really does understand my problems. But we live that kind of world, don't we, where people kind of want certainty. And sorry, I can't give it to you, you know, it's not there. Yes, I know it'd be wonderful if I could guarantee it, but it isn't going to happen. Clients desperately want it. I think they go down on their knees virtually every night and say, dear God, please God, could you make it a science, not an art? Please, could you make it a science? And of course, God says, sorry, mate, it's a bloody art. I don't understand it myself, you know. I love embracing lots of different things. I want to read as much as I possibly can, experience as much as I possibly can. And I think we're attracted to enthusiasm, and it drives work, it drives kind of an awareness, it drives energy. And there is something rather wonderful about enthusiasm. And it was a friend of mine who's a poet, and he talked about God a bit, you know. And he said, but just, you know, John, God is just energy. That's all God is. It's energy. You know, that's why enthusiasm is so fundamentally important. And he said to me, so you know the etymology of the word enthusiasm, don't you? You know, its origin. And I'm like, no idea. And he said it comes from the Greek, and it means to be with God. Isn't that wonderful? And that's why enthusiastic people are so good to be around. It's a sense of purpose. It's a sense of we're going to get this done. Things are going to happen. And so I think enthusiasm is crucial, especially in our industry, in the creative industry, when in a way you're creating something out of nothing. And that's what I love about what we do. You know, you start with a blank page. There's nothing there. There are essentially two types of creativity. There's pure creativity and there's applied creativity. Pure creativity is, I don't know, painting the Sistine Chapel, or thinking up The Simpsons. Frank Gehry's Bilbao Guggenheim Museum. Examples of pure creativity out of that person's mind. Applied creativity is writing the 30-second episode of The Simpsons. Got the characters, know what the characters are doing, now I've got to keep making those work and making those funny. That's applied creativity. But pure creativity is it comes straight out of somebody's imagination. If you're in advertising, you have to come in every day and have a new idea. And that idea can't be like yesterday's idea. It's got to be genuinely different. And that is an intensely creative environment, intensely creative.
These letters are from Johnson's babies whose mums are forgetting to use their Johnson's cotton buds.
Over and above all of that, you've got to have a creative philosophy. What do you believe in? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to say?
The brand's keep walking mantra, adopted by pro-democracy protesters and parliamentary speechwriters. What would the farm-born Victorian grocer have thought of all of this? He'd have loved it. A Victorian farm-born grocer he might have been, but he and the family that followed him were possessed by a fiery ambition with the skill and intelligence to match. 200 years later, and Johnny Walker's still walking, and he's not showing any signs of stopping.
And I think if you look at any great creative person, you know, a painter, novelist, architect, you can see they have a point of view. And I think any creative person's got to have that. You must develop it. I got knighted in 2007. It's a weird thing, isn't it? I mean, never in a trillion years did I think anything would happen like this. It was essentially, I was going to be the first person in advertising to be knighted. And I thought, I should accept this because it's to a creative person. What they were saying is, this is what's important in this industry. Creative people are important. I was very lucky. I had a lunch with John Lasseter of Pixar, and we were talking about running creative companies. And he said something so profound. And he said, you know, you can't have a creative company unless creative people are running it. And in a way, that's what the knighthood was saying. And so I accepted on that part. It was a great, you know, compliment to the creative industry in the UK, and that's why. So it was wonderful, yeah. And it gets me tables in restaurants. Apart from that, it's completely useless. You know, I'm very, very lucky. I have two of the most wonderful kids, and I've got 6 grandchildren. So that is a wonderful legacy that you leave, and watching them grow up is just absolutely sensational. You're handing on in a way that you knew you got things handed on to you. And that's the responsibility in life, is to hand on. You know, what can you do? Hand it on. Give it on to the next generation and make them even better than you are. I think in life, you know, you always need people who are a constant rock and a kind of source of inspiration around you, that you can talk to about things, that don't have an axe to grind. You know, one of the greatest problems that you're going to have in your creative career is, as you become more successful, there are going to be fewer and fewer people you can trust to tell you what they think. And, you know, it's why I said it, every McCartney needs a Lennon who can really help you and guide you. And I was very lucky in having two partners in John and Nigel who could do that. But also I have a wonderful partner, Philippa Crane, who worked with me as a producer, and we live together now, and who is this source of creative comment around what I do, and inspires me and gives me great things to think about. But more than that, is somebody I know, when she says something, she genuinely means it. You know, and I did find, it was very funny, I think it's Shakespeare who said, it is the courtiers who kill the king. It's those around you, the yes people, who destroy you. You know, you've got to remember that creativity isn't an occupation, it's a preoccupation. It's your life, it's what you do, it's like breathing. It's what you do all the time. I think the very last thing I would say to people is that, you know, and I think I've lived my life by that, which is do interesting things and interesting things will happen to you. And I think if you do that, you'll have a fascinating life.